Hey everybody, welcome to Town Hall, this cold-induced sort of reorganization for RFU today, but Town Hall continues unabated. We're going to do a little small talk while people join. It is cold. I happen to be in Michigan because an old friend is got a significant birthday coming up, and we had to charge the car in Benton Harbor, Michigan, which is just on the coast. I'd swear the piles of snow in the mire there, they had to be 5 stories high. They were huge. The wind was whipping around. There were drifts. Um, and now over here in East Lansing, there's like 5 inches of snow, but it is cold. And I'll say we only have a winter advisory for our -11. Uh, Chicago apparently has a warning for its.
Mhm.
But I presume I think you're all snug in a house somewhere. Is that right?
Absolutely.
There we go. Yep.
But what about this big thing, this storm that's happening with catastrophic ice this weekend in the South? And
My mother-in-law is in Nashville, Tennessee, and the siblings are all trying to figure this out. So
oh,
she lives in a condo, and those houses are not meant for freezing temperatures, let alone zero and below freezing for a week. So some of you may know that my sister-in-law is a nun and physician in Nashville. The mother house, which is huge, a huge antebellum, beautiful house. That the Dominicans have. But a few years ago, same kind of weather, the sprinkler system in the roof of the chapels and things like that froze and flooded the place. So yeah, they are distinctly unprepared down there below the Ohio River, well
hmm.
below the Ohio River. All right. I think we have yeah, this is a quorum. I'm going to declare it a quorum at least. Just a reminder to people, this is always more fun when you have questions. So I'm delighted to have Gavin Farry, who's our Executive Vice President for Finance and Administration, and our CFO, Sarah Kelly, Vice President for Strategic Enrollment and Management, and Carla Rands, Director of Financial Planning and Analysis. Sorry. Um, the idea behind this is that when I started visiting people a few months ago, they sort of didn't know very much about how the budget process works. And so we're not going to, I don't know if a number is going to come up during our conversation. This is all about process and how the process works and a little bit how we're thinking about it. And we're here to answer questions. So uh, obviously you can put questions in anonymously in the Q&A and we'll do the best we can. And then I'm going to do a little bit of President's update. So it is winter. We need to have everybody be careful. So we've uh, closed down for today. The wind chill, the National Weather Service's cold warning or extreme cold warning, I think. And then we had a group of people who are actors and standardized patients who are going to be coming in probably by train and other things. And the train system had moved to holiday hours, so it just seemed like the best course of action. I appreciate everybody in security and administration and the provost's office working on that. Just a little celebration. Dr. Kim and his 1.9 million NIH grant that was on the website. It's going to be in my update this week, but working on calcium or voltage gated calcium channels, and everybody who's taken enough biology knows these little guys. So they are the core piece of how our nerves transmit signals and trigger the release of neurotransmitters. There are even similar kinds of things in our muscles that help release calcium from and activate our muscles. So it's a really important group of basic science. It's great to have that recognition and get to do the work. So a few other sort of not much has changed, but you may have heard a little bit. We've been working with the state both on tax status for the woodlands, but also the situation with the VA properties and how that works. All that work continues. I am excited by the prospect of archaeologists going to do a survey down on our northern tier. So more about that when we know more about it. Nursing has been working on early start, and some of their programs will be in the early start pool this coming summer. I'm just so delighted of the work that our programs and Sarah Kelly and her team have been doing around early start. I think it's incredibly important for our students and our programs. And it's one of those things where sometimes challenging circumstances lead you to be creative in ways that can be useful overall. So, to the extent that there are academic opportunities for us to decompress some of those programs or change a little bit how they work, this has been an interesting and I think fruitful piece of work. So I appreciate everybody's work around that. I would spend a lot of time talking or some time talking about budget, but that's what we're going to be talking about. So I'll just pass right over that. Today or this week, I had the opportunity to go to the Institute of Medicine of Chicago. Our alumni were there. I talk about that more in my update, which will come out later, but that was a really interesting event. And then I visited Illinois Masonic and our alumni and their president, Matt Primick, this week. It was great to see a little bit of where our students go and meet with our clinical affiliates. So I'm getting to see a little bit more of that kind of stuff here this month. And I'm I really appreciate everybody's support. Everybody's been so welcoming. So, with that as my update, I'm gonna take us into the meat of the conversation here. Budget is a huge deal, obviously. This is how we decide how to use our resources and what we're going to um, it often has a big impact, right, on our total impact. So not only the education that we can offer, but how we work with our community collaborators, the science that we do, and how we move resources around internally. It is an incredibly important piece of work. And one of the things that I've appreciated in getting to talk to people is that um, there's been an incredible amount of, I'm just going to say, respect for the process that has been generated over the years here. So I fully expected a whole bunch of faculty and staff to get in my ear about, budget and things like that. But people have really been very supportive and communal in their sense of what needs to be done. I know that the Rosalind Franklin, its staff and its faculty have made real sacrifices over the last several years to get us toward a flat budget. So borrowing money is really not something we can do in the long run, right? Especially around operations. It makes it impossible for us to do anything else. One of the reasons that I'm spending more and more time working on fundraising is because if we're going to get to do anything fun, we have to find ways to, make a difference in the budget. So standing pat and having a flat budget, really, really hard to maintain programs and maintain ourselves. So we have to get our expenses under control. We have to maximize revenue. You all know that, but I'm going to turn the screen over to Gavin and team. And like I said, questions always make this more fun. Feel free to put them into the Q&A. So Gavin, the screen is yours.
Aaron, thank you. And again, thank you for having us to participate in this town hall today. And a big welcome to my colleagues, Sarah Kelly, the VP of Strategic Enrollment Management, and Carla Rands. Work very closely with Carla, leading the budget process, Director of Financial Planning Analysis. As Aaron alluded, we're not going to see many. I don't think there's actually any numbers in the deck, financial numbers at least. So we're really going to focus on the why and the how. We've put a few slides together, and then hoping we can delve into open Q&A, folks. Answer any of your questions. And so without any further ado, I'm going to share my screen. Give me a sec. Okay. So let's jump straight in. So we're going to start with the why it matters. And again, we really aren't going to be touching on numbers today, folks. But we're going to explain why we budget, how the process works as we get into the presentation. And in particular, we face in a current state, uncertain national environment that we're working within. So how do we plan in this uncertain environment? As we work, so let's address the why, right? The why really is all about strategy. It's how the strategy becomes real. It's how we make choices about our people, programs, priorities, very important priorities. We've got unlimited resources, and so a big prioritization. And it's all around protecting the long-term health and improving the long-term health of our institution. And then finally, why it matters is that the budgeting process, especially in times of uncertainty, it's a stabilizing force. It helps us navigate through uncertain times. So the goal, the hope is that by the end of today, as we work through this, not only will you have a better understanding of the why and the how, but also how you all are linked to this whole process. Okay, so now the how. And I've got the little diagram at the bottom of the screen that you can see, and I'm going to focus on that. And it all starts off at that 5-year plan. We've built a budget process that combines long-term strategic direction with a detailed bottom-up annual budget. And so each year, at that November, December timeframe, we take a 5-year plan, an updated 5-year plan to the board, and they affirm a rolling 5-year financial plan. And that sets the strategic and financial framework. And then from there, when January rolls around, our deans and VPs build their annual budget using guidance that comes from the long-term 5-year plan. And that guidance drives that bottom-up budget that folks work on. Those budgets are submitted, reviewed, refined. And if you look at the bottom there, department budgets and review, there really should be an arrow that goes both ways because it's very much an iterative process. Goes back and forth as we update and review things before final budgets are sent before the board and approved. Now, very importantly, if you look at the center, I've got Resource Allocation Committee, SRAC, and maybe you've heard that acronym, SRAC. It stands for Resource Allocation Committee. It's comprised of representation across the university. That SRAC committee is the hub of that whole budget process, both the long-term budget, the 5-year plan, and then as we get into the annual budget process, very much involved through all processes, right? In particular, the committee works through the difficult work of resource allocation and prioritization in finalizing the annual budget. When those departmental budgets roll up and we start to analyze the budget at a university level, invariably there's going to be the task of having to prioritize and reallocate things to make the global budget balance. And so SRAC committee is instrumental in doing that before we, as a group, present the budget back to Aaron, our president, and then it goes to the final board for approval.
So remind the good people who's on SRAC.
Oh, so we've got representation from a few deans, Aaron. Myself, so I chair the SRAC committee, and Carla is on that, helps from a finance perspective with me. Very importantly, we've got Sarah Kelly, who represents Strategic Enrollment Management. We've got our provost, Dr. Jim Carlson, and then we've got deans, Dr. Lisa Dudden, Dr. Archie Chatterjee. And who am I missing, folks? I know I'm missing someone. We've also got Lee Concha. Go ahead.
Kelly. Jeff Espina.
And Jeff Espina representing our clinic. So, and then we've got our EVP over research. So we've really got all aspects of the university covered and represented, from the academic programs, the health clinic, research, and then the administrative functions. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to hand over to Carla.
Okay, so what is it that we budget? So we budget for revenue, operating expenses, and capital across all of the administrative, patient care, research, and all of the academic programs in the university. So as you can imagine, there's hundreds of people that get involved either directly or indirectly in the budget process. Along those lines, when we're looking at putting the budget into the system, there's support schedules and things that are done that people bring in it and consolidate there. We've got thousands of individual budget lines that make up the total global budget. And so I had to sneak a few numbers in here, Gavin. I apologize.
It's
But
okay.
just
It's okay.
just to set the context for everybody about what the budget is, what's involved in it. We've got 184 departments within the university that we budget. That's over 1,000 people that we're budgeting for. And we have $300 million. We've got revenue dollars, we've got operating expense dollars, and we have capital dollars. And then the time that the budget is worked on is really from the very, very start to the very, very end. It's 7 months worth of time. So not all of that is really focused, hardcore budget work. We have that for probably about 2.5 to 3 months. But then, as Gavin alluded to, we have the kind of back and forth. We get more information, we refine the budget. We may reprioritize if something comes up or strategy shifts in the university. So we want the budget to support that strategy overall. So you can go to the next slide. So when does budgeting happen? So in the fall, we start with a 5-year plan that happens in like the November timeframe. And that plan kind of creates or encompasses rather assumptions that we use for the budget that ultimately get translated into budget guidance for the departments. And in the winter, which is where we're at right now, departmental budgets are being developed by the departments. We also have some things that are input by finance in support of the departments. And we're rolling it up and we're looking at it, comparing that to guidance, and we refine that as we need to. And then in the early spring, about early March, Gavin takes the preliminary budget forward to the board for approval. And the context of that approval is really around tuition rates and fees. So we need to get those approved so that we can communicate those, and some can include them in the academic catalog that they put out. I believe it's the 1st of April or right around there. And then again, we continue to monitor, adjust, maybe reprioritize as needed. And then the board gets the final copy of the budget for their approval. In the 2 years that I've been here, they've approved it as we brought it to them. We didn't need to refine anything. And so just to kind of look at that flow, SRAC approves the 5-year plan that goes to the board for their input, and they give their approval on that. Budget owners build that budget. Again, it goes through SRAC for approval and President's Cabinet before going to the board for final approval. And so kind of that whole flow is what takes the 7 months.
Thank you, Carla. Over to Sarah.
All right. So thank you. And so I think I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we arrive at our headcount goals and our tuition revenue goals. As you can see here, tuition and enrollment are a big driver of our total revenue. And so we want to approach that responsibly each year. So this is done in working meetings, and it's largely this month. It's January and February. And so we meet with each program, or college, but within College of Health Professions and the College of Nursing, there are several individual programs. So this is done program by program, college by college, and they're working meetings. So we are all in the same room, Zoom room, but everybody is hearing everything real time. So there's no partial knowledge of one area versus another. So everything is sort of on the table. We begin with what really happened in the past year. How did we perform? We said we were going to get X students. Did we get those students? We're not only interested in headcount, but what was the profile of each of our cohorts coming in? We have, how many of them were from Illinois? How many of them were from the region? We go sort of line by line in all of that. We do this, we walk through different scenarios. For example, what happens if interest is stronger in one program and softer in another? We do all of this before we even start to put numbers into a budget. We look at each college's tuition rate against primary competitors for that program. We do this again by all being together. So who's in a typical enrollment planning meeting? It will always be the dean and the academic leadership, because all of this affects teaching load, clinical placements, and the student experience in their college or programs. And the deans are ultimately responsible for that. Program chairs and directors are involved because they're closest to the students and the faculty in their program on the ground, right? Finance is involved. So the enrollment plan lines up with the budget and doesn't create surprises. What we're trying to do is get as much precision as possible in this plan. So financial aid is involved. So we take into account student indebtedness, patterns of borrowing, by program. Admissions is there because they see what's happening first. So they see differences in program. Where are students choosing between Rosalind Franklin and other programs? Are there emerging competitors? Just give you an example, there are 2 new DO schools opening. We have to talk about that. Where might we be affected by that? There are new programs in physical therapy opening. How might that affect us? And so we hear from the program chairs, we hear from the deans and all of this. This helps us avoid the false assumption that every program behaves the same way as students go through the admission and ultimately their decision-making process. It's very different. But it's not just the students who are new to us. We spend a lot of time talking about how students move through their programs. An example, for CMS, a lot of our M3 students might consider a year to take a time away and do research. That's something that we want to support, and it's something that we need to plan for, because that will change class progression, it will change tuition timing. And so again, we take time to walk through all of those different scenarios and plan for it. From any of you who've worked with me, it's not the most efficient way to do this, is to get everybody to stop their day jobs and come together, but it's effective. And we've seen that. I think Gavin can attest. We've had a more predictable tuition budget for the past few years that we've been engaging in this work. But the predictability is what allows us to sort of plan calmly and clear-eyed and not be in reactive mode for the changes that might be coming ahead. And there are changes coming ahead that I think we want to discuss. This year is a little different. Gavin, can you go to the next slide, please?
No,
Yeah,
before you leave that, so I just want to go through the pie chart. So tuition and fees are 70% of our revenue, right? That 11%, those are grants and contracts of one sort or another. The 8% is patient care. And then the yellow is 4%, which is investments. And the next one is 3%, which is auxiliary. And the next one is 3%, which is philanthropy, right? And I think that there's like a 1% that's still hanging out there. That's all from the 2024 annual report, which you can find on the website. I mean, the easiest solution to budget issues is more revenue, right? That is the one that's the easiest for everybody to manage. But there's a limit to what you can ask for from each of these, or you can do from each of these revenue sources. Some of them can be increased, right? Some of them we should not be increasing. Like, we're already tuition dependent. Our students are already supporting so much. There's a limit to what we should be doing, right? And there's a limit to what the market can withstand. However, there are these other little slices of pie. We can try to work on making them bigger, not by making others smaller, but actually bringing more in absolute value. Not that we have any numbers. Okay, sorry. I just wanted to make sure people had knew what was on the rest of that pie chart.
I love those
Thank you.
comments, Aaron. And there's another angle over here as well. This takes up a large part of the budget when we look at net tuition and fees. And it's so critical and important for the other side of the coin, the expense side, because not only is this
Mhm.
important to get an accurate budget number around that 70% piece of our pie, net tuition and fees, but it also take the financial piece away. Through those discussions, as Sarah spoke, it's understanding the class profile, what we expect to come in terms of headcount, and then that helps the deans and the VPs sort of look at the other side of the coin. What resources are we going to need on the expense side to deliver and make those students successful that are coming into those programs? So it's really very critical part of the whole budget process.
Mhm.
I'll add, right? Flux is really hard for us to manage, right? So if one program gets smaller, right, and we have to, decrease the resources and the people involved, and then it gets bigger, then we got to find those people, bring them back, and change the budget again. I mean, I can think of a couple of deans who like made sure I understand that that's happening to their school, their college, right? So, it's not only these numbers, but the flux in the numbers becomes a complicated thing for us to manage. Yeah, all right. Sorry, keep going.
I do want to mention that in these meetings, we also talk about what's coming up, and I think our academic leadership and deans have done a great job of thinking about new programs. Last year, the College of Health Professions launched the Doctor of Medical Science program, and we are actively recruiting for our first adult Gero acute care DNP program and certification. So these are important ways of planning for the future as well as to what can we do that is new. And so it's been fun to work with the deans and program chairs on and marketing specifically on how to launch all of these. So this is a bit of a different. This is starting to be a different budget planning. So I think for a lot of us, we are aware of the changes to that are coming to graduate student lending and borrowing in terms of the elimination of the Grad Plus loan and the imposition of new borrowing caps for graduate and professional education, which is most of, if not all of our population. What's important for this discussion today is that this is not going to happen suddenly. It's not going to happen all at once. We do have time to plan for this. So again, from a timing perspective, the near term is relatively stable. So current students and most of our students coming to us in spring and summer will be largely unaffected initially by these changes, but that gives us time to plan, to um, not only plan budget wise, right? But it also gives us time to plan to support students as they are considering all of their options and how to finance their education. So that time matters, right? This has given us time to model options. We've been really thinking about enrollment and financial aid and how we're going to do this. It's helping us avoid reactive mode. We're trying to be as proactive as possible. So there is uncertainty further out, but we know the uncertainty. We know what the proportion of our budget is that we're going to have to plan to receive differently than we did in the past, and how that's going to affect students and how we're going to have to support students. And so because enrollment and budgeting are planned so closely together, I think it just allows us to plan carefully and responsibly for the resources that we steward.
There
Um,
is some good news this week in the sense that it shouldn't, I don't think it has a big effect on us because I don't think we have that many people on Pell, but Pell funding was sort of saved at the last moment.
mhm.
Federal work study, and I know we have people on work study, also got funded again, at least by Congress. I suppose it doesn't have to be signed, but so it's got a couple of steps yet to go. However, there are some things that don't require congressional action, like the definition of professional versus graduate student, right? Which all across the country, everybody's trying to figure out first of all, why they would make that change and what in the world were they thinking, but also then trying to figure out what it means to our folks.
Right. You're bringing in a good point with the preservation of Pell, because some of our students relied heavily on Pell at the undergraduate level,
Yeah.
and there's going
Which
to
can
be
help them out now. Yeah.
right, there's going to be a
Yeah.
cap on how much they can borrow in total. So,
Hmm.
what I think we're seeing is that more than ever, graduate institutions like ours have to work closely with undergraduate institutions to plan for what these long tail planning, career training programs look like. And I
Yeah.
think we're doing that.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to move us forward, and I think it's a good segue as we spoke about all that uncertainty out in the marketplace right now. How do we, from a budget perspective, plan under uncertainty, right? And I've got some prompts over here: conservative assumptions, flexibility to adjust, and let's talk about a few of these themes that you see on the screen. Well, firstly, we are going to be prudent rather than optimistic. We want to evaluate multiple scenarios as you go to the right over there. We've got systems in place that we can run various scenario planning through, and so that's very helpful. And again, flexibility. And based on our size and the collaborative nature in terms of how we operate and the good processes in place, those all help us to be flexible. But I also don't want to lose sight of continuous monitoring. Carla spoke about that timeline. We finalized that preliminary budget in March, and then we come back in June and present a final budget. And during that interim period, we continually looking at updating our assumptions, looking at what's changed in the landscape, and we'll make real-time changes to the budget that we ultimately present back to the board in June and finalize. And so when you look at this approach, conservative assumptions, scenario awareness, being flexible, continuous monitoring, this approach really helps us remain steady and deliberate rather than, I think Sarah used the word a little earlier, reactive. We don't want to be reactive. And it helps us in particular as we face this external environment that continues to evolve underneath our feet. It helps us be a little bit more thoughtful. Also, want
I
to
think
speak of,
also, oh
go
yeah.
ahead.
So the board has helped us with this over the last couple of years, is my understanding that a lot of these folks come from a more straightforward market-based business world more than our academic world, and I think, would usually expect budgets to be done sooner, but they understand our revenue is not understood until much later in the cycle, and so they have allowed us to push back approval so that we are better, our budget has better revenue numbers, more accurate revenue numbers than maybe some surrounding non-educational organizations would have.
Definitely. Yep, they've been very supportive supporting in this process. Before I move off the slide, I just wanted to delve in a little bit more tactically, a real world in terms of our current budget. And so I think Aaron might have mentioned this in the last few years. We've had a budget that's been approved with an operating deficit. And so what does that mean? It means that our accounting income has been less than our accounting expenses. And you may ask, well, how have we managed that, right? And so we've, in reality, balanced our negative cash flow by utilizing funds from our endowment to cover that shortfall. And this is not a long-term solution, folks. If we're fortunate in that with how the markets have performed, our endowment's grown larger than what we've spent out of it. But to maintain our financial strength, we really need to be in a position where we contribute into our endowment on top of growth versus taking out, especially when we think about heightened levels of uncertainty. And so I'm pleased to report that in conjunction with our 5-year plan, a big focus was how do we plan for this glide path to an eventual break even? And we're very cognizant that this wasn't a light switch. We didn't want to, we couldn't just do it overnight. And so our 5-year plan thoughtfully built in, with the support of our board, a gradual glide path toward a break-even budget. And gradually over the last 2 years, we've been able to reduce that deficit, and we are managing very close to budget. And as we start to prepare and finalize our FY27 budget, that is the year that we are planning to present in front of the board a break-even budget. So this is the year where, again, we need to come together, collaborative nature, and deliver that break-even budget. And you may ask, what are some of the key tenets in terms of getting there? You heard Sarah speak about a lot of growth. We've invested in a lot of growth in programs over the last few years. Those are helping significantly as we approach fiscal year 2027, helping support us get to that break-even budget. But we've also been very cognizant on the expense side of the coin, looking for areas of opportunity, how we can better manage our real estate portfolio, and optimize the way we do things.
Well, and I want to add, right? I know that the people of RFU have felt this, right? Whether or not it's changes in retirement benefits or raises or things like that. I mean, this is something that people here have felt.
Totally. And I think that's that's a good segue in terms of my next slide, Aaron, because I wanted to speak about the budget really not just being a finance exercise. Decisions across the entire institution, when we think about enrollment, retention, the timing of how we use resources, collectively, we all play a role in shaping the financial outcome of our university. And hopefully, understanding the process a little bit more is going to give everyone a little bit of a better picture of how you all fit into the puzzle, right? And I like that interlocking graphic at the bottom of the slide, really highlighting we all play a part in this process. And I've even got students at the top there, and while they're not directly involved in the budgeting process, their needs, enrollment decisions around them, and us thinking through their success and the outcomes that they need to achieve to be successful, those items directly shape the priorities as we work through building up the budget. I think that's going to bring us to the end of our formal comments, folks, and I'm going to stop sharing in a second. We can pivot to questions, and we would welcome those. And Aaron, I yield back to you.
We've got some. Yeah, we've got some. So yeah, you can feel free to stop sharing. Antoine Haywood asks two questions. What institutional priorities are most compelling to donors right now? And two, are there opportunities to formalize partnerships where external stakeholders help co-fund education and training pipelines tied to workforce needs? So a couple of excellent questions that I'll start with the first one. And I have a couple of answers to that question. As an academic, I want to allow myself to give conflicting answers sometimes to a question. The first is that I don't know enough about RFU donors to really specifically answer that question. I'll say that RFU's priorities, at least as I've been able to suss out what people are most concerned with and interested in, is that we need to support scholarships and students as sort of the first thing that we would support. We need to support faculty. So we have very few endowed professorships of one way or another. That helps the budget because obviously there's money to help pay for those people, but also they're incredibly important for recruiting. We have space needs. So a part of the reason that we've had to borrow money in the past is that we have worked on creating a beautiful campus. And there is a master plan that is good for all of us. Their students are looking for more and high quality study space, a gym. We have some interest in, additional research opportunities and programming and things like that. So space is one, and then there's support for programs. And we have been, there have been some foundations that have been really good about helping us with the ICC and the community care coach and other programming and things like that. And there are whole ways that's financially good and useful. So those are the things that we need to be working on. I suspect that there will be some people, mostly alumni, who want to support scholarships. And then you got to find the right other community donors and other folks who want to support faculty and programs. And I suspect there's some combined group for space. That's just based on what I've seen elsewhere. Um, so I think that's what we know right now. The second question there, are there opportunities to formalize partnerships where external stakeholders help co-fund education and training pipelines tied to workforce needs? And certainly that is one of the things that our clinical affiliate partners both support, right? They're providing an opportunity and they're charging us for them. So it's not only a place where they can help us, but it's also a place where some of our expenses go. Sarah, you're leaning forward. Like I think you might be ready to speak to this a little bit.
No, I think that Dr. Hayward's question is spot on in terms of where to explore.
Yeah, the workforce part, obviously there have been people who have tried service-based scholarships and things like that. The government and the military are particularly good at that. It's a little harder when you get to other programs and systems. Having and For accreditation reasons, loan forgiveness doesn't necessarily help us the way prospective scholarships do. I think that there are times when communities really want providers and they see that, partnering with us can help with that we may be able to get some support, but it has been overall, that's a tricky piece. Really important though. Even just decreasing expenses would make a big difference for us in those circumstances. Anything else, Sarah, Gavin,
No, I
Carla?
just know that in the course of our planning, I've really come to appreciate the real constraint of clinical placement availability
Yep.
in terms of allowing some of our programs to grow. And I think they know that's something that I know that academic leadership is working on. But I've been in the face of, and some deans, if they're on, are going to laugh, the face of me pushing, like, I want more students. I've come to really respect the deans in not wanting to thwart the progress of current students by a lack of clinical placement, and they have
Yeah.
put that in front and center every single conversation. So that's been gratifying to see.
So
I
that's a
still want
nice
more
segue.
students.
Yeah, yeah. That's a nice segue to an anonymous question. While headcount is clearly important for revenue, so is the effect of student quality on progression and expenses related to student support. How are these two concepts properly balanced? And I'll say that it goes even beyond, student preparedness and their life situation in terms of how they progress. But some of that gets to the question of things like the Grad Plus loans. So you can just imagine that some student comes in, we're excited for them to be with us. They're excited to be we're excited to have them. They're excited to be with us. They've got an aunt or an uncle who's going to co-sign their private loan. Then something happens to their aunt or uncle, and all of a sudden, then what? Right? Um, and, that will happen in the sort of new world version that the federal government is proposing. We will see not only, attrition because of life circumstances or academics, but also financial circumstances. And you can't just add those people back in for the very reasons that Sarah talked about. If you're let's take, 4-year programs like podiatry and medicine. If you lose somebody in the second year, you can't just add a second year student. That's, you know, and you can't bring them back. I mean, like, how are they going to get back in order if they find the money again? Like, it's could be awful. So, but anyway, Sarah, you want to talk a little bit about, you sort of did, but the progression piece and how you think about that, or how you have conversations with the deans about that?
Well, first we start by listening to the deans again and the program chairs because they know where the tripwires are and they know, what we're trying to do is on the admission end, really, and we've done this work and going back and sort of looking at what our applicant pool looks like, what our admit pool looks like, following that admit pool through the first, especially the didactic years, where are those
Mhm.
tripwires? And so the programs, I think, have been pretty adept in adapting, sort of treatment, if you will, on for progression, sort of overlaying coaching, overlaying. I know that we've seen several of our colleges do that, and so it's been gratifying to see changes in progression. And Carla and I are partners in crime. I failed to acknowledge your critical role in the enrollment planning process as Carla. She and I we do this together. So we've seen some good changes even from year one to year two, just in 1 year of doing that. But going back to how we're going to support people, I know that Erin, you've had good ideas about, the just private
Mhm.
foundations. We can find several sweet spots to work with private foundations. And I know you've mentioned.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've had some conversations about non-traditional partners or mission-aligned lenders, and who might have an interest in being supporting students, right? And we'll see if that pans out, right? Like you can have a whole bunch of ideas and they don't actually pan out. So we'll have to see. But I'm hopeful that there are some we get to a place where we have some lenders of one sort or another who do not require a cosign, and that takes away at least a part of the problem that students face. Or, you know, maybe we could find some other institution, or look in the couch cushions for ways to co-sign and help those students along. But it, the I don't know about this for all of our programs, but often what I'm watching is, there are students out there that we want. We have to get them sometimes, right? And some of this gets to cost.
Right.
So, and our ability to put forth tuition cost that competes with other folks to make those great students attractive. And we want them to be able to come to us because they want to come to us, to follow their heart. And so that's one of the reasons we need to control the cost of tuition and raise money for scholarships and all those pieces. So let's see here. I'm going to presume that that's a reasonable answer and move on to anonymous number two. Student applicant pools differ across colleges and programs. Are new or additional resources interventions being directed toward recruiting applicants for programs that have seen lower applicant numbers in recent years? And I happen to know the answer to that is yes.
Yes. Yeah. Uh, uh, this is again, this dovetails nicely into a discussion about budget. We have ramped up marketing and enrollment. The institution has invested in both enrollment and marketing to be able to get the word out. It used to be a long time ago, we didn't have to worry about classes filling. But again,
Mhm.
competition and, you know, just there's a need to get our name out there. One of the things when students come to us, they come and they visit campus, they're like, I never knew this place existed. This is amazing. Well, we can't afford to be a best kept secret. And so the
Yeah.
institution has put a lot of dollars, frankly, behind enrollment and behind marketing. And, we've seen the trajectory along with programs and colleges launching new degrees and programs. So we've put significant dollars behind that. And hopefully we're seeing the ROI. I would have to rely on our CFO to answer that question.
And Aaron and Sarah and Carla, these questions are good questions, and I think they just go
Mhm.
to how nuanced and complicated that revenue piece of the budget is, right? Which is why we sort of pulled it out and focused on it as a separate slide. It's so important to get that 70% accurate from a budgeting perspective. And just to reinforce the collaborative nature, over the last 2, 3 years, how we've brought all of the parties together in a room, finance, strategic enrollment management, and the deans to all year and a project solve and scenario plan together. And it's not a one size fits all. It's going to be different for each of the programs when we think through the retention piece of the puzzle, attracting the class size in. And so that collaborative nature of the process helps us through the process and puts us in good shape.
It doesn't take a huge amount of analysis to sort out that enrollment in existing programs is a more efficient way to grow revenue than new programs, right? Some new programs like DMS don't take new clinical sites and things like that. And so we can build those without maybe quite without the difficulty of clinical sites. And we have several programs that essentially need the same kind of clinical site, right? Um, so that's not always easy to solve, but if we could, have more students in, 4-year degrees that um, that have real tuition, then that's the easiest revenue for us to raise. It's just not always possible to do that. But there's no doubt people here understand that, and that is a part of what the marketing and other things have been about. It actually gets to some of the choices we're going to have to make. I personally don't think that we are putting enough into public relations and having the world know who we are, and that that's an important part of the flywheel for new applicants and new donors and new community funding and state funding and a whole range of things like that. However, you got to figure out where that money is going to come from, right? And marketing the existing programs is more important than Aaron's interest in more PR, right? Those are amongst the things that, you have to balance when you're thinking about all these things.
But PR will fuel an
No, I get it.
unearned. This
Yes.
last Sunday I was watching CBS Sunday Morning. I don't know if anybody saw it in Indiana. Jane
We are
Pauley is
not.
a graduate of
Yeah, yeah,
Indiana, and she just talked about how great her school was. And I was there like, that's unearned media. We need to get that
yeah.
with,
We're
we
not
can get
start.
it
Yeah,
with
we're
our
not.
researchers,
I know we're
like,
not starting a football team though.
oh, darn it.
Um, but it's true. I mean, that's why. I mean, this is a bit of a digression, but that's why those universities are falling all over themselves to try to figure out athletics, right? It is. This is. Oh, I remember as a kid, my dad was a professor at Ball State. And way back, Ball State made it to the Elite Eight in the NCAA. They lost to UNLV by a bucket.
Wow.
And the next year, not applications went up, the SAT scores of their applications went up. I mean, it
Mhm.
was just the business of knowing their existence, and all across the country, they had been advertised for. That's why they bother, right?
Right.
With that kind of work. Um, but that's not us. We have to figure out something else. So, Anonymous asks, patient care revenue, are there plans to expand the RFU health clinics? And the answer is yes, and. So, we are working really hard to make that as efficient as possible. Jeff Espina and his team have just done a great job. The simplest way for us to work on that revenue is actually right now dealing with expenses, but it is also community support for things like the ICC and the community care coach, right? So I think there is obviously students and faculty get a lot out of some of those experiences, but I'm not sure student tuition is really what that should be. It should be our community partners who are helping support those. So those are great fundraising opportunities for us that help support that clinical care. I've spent more hours of my life than I care to have trying to figure out clinical practices and how to make them work in an academic setting when you don't have a hospital. That's a bedeviling problem, right? So I'm on the lookout and interested in how we can grow. So it's good for our faculty and our students, and particularly educational opportunities. Also, the impact that we have on our community is, more and more people I think are going to be struggling, what with cuts to Medicaid and the ACA. So we have a responsibility and a place to be useful, but you know, that is not the highest and best use of our students' tuition dollars. So, we have to be thoughtful and work on that. But it would be great to figure out how to do more clinical care. Anonymous also asks, what do you feel is our biggest opportunity in the next several years for revenue growth? Are there any new initiatives or steps that we're taking in 2026 to foster these opportunities? Well, I think there are a number of things like that that we could talk about. Actually, the as the strategic enrollment management is year after year after year, right? One of our attempts to do that. So to try to make sure that we are making full use of all of our clinical sites and opportunities and philanthropy, I'm going to argue, is one of our bigger opportunities to change what our revenue cycle looks like for this kind of stuff. I think there are ways that we can look at what's happening in research to help the balance of our revenue and our expenses. Um, I think that there's also particular growth of programs. So take what the nurse anesthetist program has done in Colorado, finding a community that is welcoming and interested and needs our students and our support. And those are ways that we can grow. And I know that there have been examples of that over the history of the institution and other opportunities. But those are three things I can think of that, I think are coming down the pike. I would love to find ways that we can work with the state and our clinical partners that would bring in revenue. Those are longer term. And we have some examples of that. I think Gavin would say that one of the things over the last year or two that's been so helpful to our budget is state money around capital expenses. And so Nick and his team have done really a great job of trying to position us. That always helps the budget. So I don't know, Carla, Sarah, Gavin, other answers to that question?
No, I agree with all your comments, Aaron. I mean, it's that trifecta of more philanthropy, right? And how do we open up that spigot? Program growth, and over the last few years, we've seen tremendous growth across various programs, but in particular the College of Nursing, and we're poised to see continued growth there in FY20, the closeout of this year, and then in FY27, further growth there too. Um, so those are the two pieces of the puzzle, and I've lost track of the third one in my mind. Philanthropy, program growth, and continue to think outside of the box.
State and partners. Yeah, state
Yeah,
and
state
partners.
and partners. There we go. And the research piece.
Yep.
What about I've had some interesting conversations on delivery modality, time to degree. I mean, that's not solvable in the next 6 months of fiscal 26, but are we having conversations about that? I know some deans are thinking really creatively about that.
So we're going to go into I don't know how you guys are doing. I can just stay and keep answering questions, but we have a bunch. Are there plans to expand or enhance online non-degree programs for individuals seeking professional advancement, as well as those looking to gain new skills for employment opportunities for individuals without a four-year degree? And the answer to that is yes. I know we have deans who are particularly interested in even more growth along those lines. They seem like real opportunities. Sarah, Gavin, Carla, anything you would want to add to that?
Definitely, Dr. Wiesenen has been,
Yep.
I know she's just of the brim with great ideas, and she's done this at her previous school. So yeah.
Where does new campus expansion or enhancement for fall 27 fall in the budget priorities? I presume that's about capital.
Yeah. So from a capital planning perspective, we've got our capital master plan, and that sort of drives us. That drives the sequencing of all capital activity. As folks, I would assume, are acutely aware, we are almost complete with building out our new sim center. So that's very, very exciting, right? And we need to sit down and analyze and assess how much, what funds we have at our disposal for FY27, and then reprioritize which part of the capital master plan we next deploy into next year.
So here's a math problem, and I only learned a little bit about this yesterday. So here's this question from Anonymous. How was the cut in vacation days related to budgeting? When Illinois started requiring 40 hours of personal time, an email went out claiming that the slowing in accrual rates was just to take up that upfront time into account, but the math reveals that the slower accrual means staff here less than 8 years lost about 10 days per year, and staff lost less and staff here more than 8 lost about 5. The official explanation given out is that when this was questioned, there was vacation that had to be cut back because the work wasn't getting done. But one wonders if that possibly had more to do with the fact of unused vacation days constituting some sort of theoretical liability on the accounting books and balancing them. I'm going to have to get some help with that question. My understanding was that the 40 hours is up front, and so then the accrual was slowed down so that you'd get to the total number of days over the course of the year. But since the 40 hours had already happened, accrual was slower. I have no idea about this 8 years, about the 10 days per year or the 5. I guess that's a math question I'll have to get some help with. Gavin, do you know anything?
Complicated question, Aaron, but I think in a nutshell, when we were required to give 5 days up front,
Mm-hmm.
we adjusted that and we took an opportunity to relook at our vacation policy and reset it and redesign the accruals to best fit how we thought the policy read.
My understanding was you should get the same number of days because of the upfront days at the end of the
You
year,
do get
but
the same number of days. What changed
days.
was the accrual rate.
Yep, I understand.
Yeah.
Yep, okay. I'm not sure that helps an anonymous, but we'll see what we can do. Is there a chance that the cost of tuition could be changed to fit within new lending limits so that students graduate with less debt rather than having them find alternative ways to increase their debt? Wouldn't that be great? We would need additional sources of revenue in order to make that happen. Philanthropy is an opportunity for that. I have some hope that philanthropic work will be a little bit more successful given what students are facing. But we'll have to see.
Agreed.
Okay. The health clinics used to be super busy in years past. The current numbers are extremely low, they say. Are there plans in place to get the clinic numbers back up? That entirely depends on the kind of clinic that you're running, right? So I understand that primary care used to be there, is not there. And the clinic finances are held up by, in particular, just a couple of folks, and depends on where you put the clinic, the lab in our budget. So we would look at numbers based on expense and what kind of revenue it can bring in. If we're going to be careful not to bring numbers up that only increase our expenses more than our revenue.
And Aaron, the only other point I'd make there is that while there's maybe a decrease in activity at the bricks and mortar clinic, we've seen tremendous growth strategically in our community care coach. So the
Yep.
strategy has really been to go out into the community and grow that piece of the puzzle, which is supported philanthropically, right? So
Yeah.
we've seen tremendous growth there.
Good point. Good point. Anonymous asks, a challenge I've observed is that as an institution, we often seek foundation support to launch new programs and initiatives, but there isn't a clear plan to sustain those once they've launched. Can you shed light on how, in instances where new programs and initiatives are initially funded by foundations or other external sources, decisions about continued support of those programs and initiatives are part of the RFU as part of the RFU budget are made? So this is the classic thing in philanthropy, right? Where you get the grant that costs you in the long run because somebody's interested in a program and then you start it, but then there is not a path for supporting it in the long run. You have to be really, really, you got to work really carefully to make sure you don't say yes to grants like that.
Agreed.
And so the second part of that question as to how that happens in the budget, that gets to the business plan for these things and whether or not there is a reason to do them in a self-sustaining way to begin with before we say yes to the grant. But I don't know whether or not we have how that works in the budget.
Yeah, it's on a case by case basis, but I will say a large amount of the program growth that we've experienced over the last few years has actually been funded by the board by allocating funds out of the endowment. And so
Yeah.
we go to the board with a thoughtful business plan over 5 years and an ROI, and based on that thoughtful plan, we'll fund that out of the endowment in a lot of situations. So that's actually how we funded the launch of the College of Nursing and the growth in the College of Nursing.
And most of the foundation support in that, if I'm not mistaken, were for scholarships for students.
Mhm.
Yeah. You're right. A lot of the support goes toward
Yeah.
scholarships.
Yep. Is there a relative cost, financial or otherwise, of increasing student to faculty ratios being considered to determine whether individual schools can adequately support an increase in class size, particularly for schools that are already experiencing clinical site capacity constraints?
Mm.
And I don't, so I don't sit in those meetings. I have some ideas of what's probably going on based on what I've heard, but Sarah or Gavin or Carla, you want to take a whack at that?
I'm
Very
not sure.
careful whack. We would need the expertise of the deans and the program chairs who are
Yeah.
working constantly with accreditors. So much of that is accreditor driven, I believe. Um, Gavin?
Yeah, I'm
I
not sure I fully understood the question, but I think I heard increase in the student to faculty ratio. Is correct? In other words, growing the class size and keeping the faculty size the same. I think the bigger bottleneck is the clinical sites.
Right.
We don't have enough clinical sites to send our students to, and so that's one of the limiting factors on growth. That and hard to get through the accreditors too. But a big part of it is not enough clinical sites to send folks to.
Well, it's
I can
also there's
imagine.
an assumption. So I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
There's also, and I'm not on the faculty planning side of things by any
Mhm.
means, but we do have some very leanly staffed
Yeah.
Yep.
departments that are producing, nationally recognized programs. So,
Yep.
that balance is pretty tight, I think.
I also know there are deans who's, had to shrink their faculty because of
Correct.
shrinking revenue. And then as they get more people, then they've got to add folks.
Right.
And whether or not you think about that as a student faculty ratio, or you just think about it as a workload that you have to adjust, I think I can imagine how that comes into both of these. You do have to have faculty and
Yeah.
staff in order to support those students. Michael Ellison asks, will we move from the quarter system to semesters? And I haven't asked for that financial analysis. For undergraduate institutions, semesters are cheaper because you teach fewer German courses and teach algebra less often and teach calculus less often. I don't know that it makes that much difference for programs like us. It hasn't been high on my wish list for a financial analysis because just by looking at how courses and things like that are offered, I don't think it would. I don't think the semester quarter dynamic changes much for us.
I
So
think
that's been
sometimes
lower on
what
my list.
what when we've had these conversations just tangentially, again, it was it offers time for a better time for remediation
Mhm.
potentially. Um,
There may well be academic reasons for us to do it, but I doubt that I would it would I'm open to the conversation, of course, and we should have Jim Carlson here to have a conversation about it. But I mean, we control the schedule, right? I
mm,
mean, if there's something that we need to do to make remediation work, we have all of the buttons and levers.
right, right.
Anonymous asks, the accrual cap stays this. Oh, this is the um.
Mm.
Well, I'm gonna have to get more expertise on how people accrue, and I don't know how we'll get an answer to anonymous, um, but I don't have any more math for that. Um, so I apologize, I don't have more answer for that anonymous, but we'll see what we can do. Um, that is the end of our questions, and we have gone over a little bit, but I appreciate everybody's engagement, in particular, Gavin, Sarah, Carla. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks to all of you for joining us. And thanks for all you do to support our faculty, our staff, and our students. It is the work of people like you that make the university such a special place to be. It is Friday. I hope you get to have a weekend. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.